So, welcome to part 4 of this lesson on economics, and this is going to be about globalisation. Now, there's a loose understanding of globalisation as meaning world trade, trade on the global level, so that we become dependent on goods and services produced by people far away. And in this sense, globalisation goes back a long way. Even in the Stone Age, people were trading over very long distances. And archaeologists are always finding that trade and movement was over much greater distances than they thought before. But there's a more technical definition of globalization, which is about moving the parts of your economy beyond your national borders out into the wider world. So let's see what we mean by that. So here is Britain at the time of the Industrial Revolution, and it has the elements of an economy that we saw in part 2 of this lesson on macroeconomic modelling: households, banks and manufacturing industry. And at this time, Britain was known as the workshop of the world, and using its own people and on its own land, it manufactured a wide range of goods and grew rich from exporting those to the rest of the world. But what happened later is that Britain started moving its factories to other parts of the world because it found that labour was cheaper elsewhere, and also that the raw materials it needed were out in the world, and it was better to put the factories close to the raw materials rather than import those raw materials into Britain and manufacture them there. So the factories sort of started disappearing from Britain and dotting up elsewhere. And the thing was that Britain, being wealthy, used that money to fund the setting up of these factories. So it's overseas investment. So putting their money into making factories around the world. And this then was globalisation of the British economy. A major part of it was now no longer just within Britain's borders, but was dotted around the world. But these were still part of the British economy, of households consuming and money coming into banks and so on. And this is a feature, according to Palak Patel, of what he calls lead economies. So at one point, Britain was the lead economy of the world. Now, this process of globalization causes concerns. It causes concerns in the original nation, the lead economy, because people say, oh, well, what's happening to our manufacturing industry? We don't make anything anymore. And if we don't make anything anymore, how can we trade successfully with the rest of the world? So people start to become concerned about the disappearance of their manufacturing industry overseas and their reduction to being just a kind of financial hub of this globalized economy. And overseas it causes concern because people say, well, hang on, we're working in factories in our own country, using the raw materials of our own country, and yet the profits are all going back to Britain or the lead economy, whatever it is. This doesn't seem fair. Well, of course, those concerns about losing your manufacturing industry are not really relevant because you haven't really lost it, you've just globalized it. And again, those concerns here about it not being fair, well, all the know-how for these factories and all the money to set them up came from this financial system here, the lead economy. So it's not really surprising then that the profits come back to that lead economy. But what happens, of course, in the long run is that these other areas that where the factories are being set up start to gain that know-how, and gain their own prosperity, so that they can start to set up their own factories and make the profits from those factories themselves. And so the lead economy does not remain the lead economy forever or for very long. And Patel suggests that there's been a series of lead economies over the last few centuries, from Italy to the Netherlands to the UK, Britain, and of course today to the US, and then to wherever. Now, the lead economy, at the time that it is the lead economy, its currency becomes the global reserve currency. And what we mean by that is that other countries want to hold the currency of the lead economy. They want to put their spare cash into that currency. And the reason for that is because when this country, the lead economy, is the workshop of the world, that's where you want to go to get all the goods and services that you desire. That's where you get the most choice and the best choice. And so you want to have that currency that you can purchase from that workshop of the world. And so when other countries trade among themselves, one country will say to the other, well, yes, we'll sell you these, but we don't want your, doubloons or whatever it is. We want the reserve currency. We want pounds or dollars or pieces of eight. So the reserve currency becomes, or the lead economy's currency becomes the currency of international trade, and it becomes the currency of international finance because it's, funding all these factories. So it is a currency that everybody wants, and that gives the lead economy at that time two great advantages. The first is what's called seigniorage. Seigniorage is something that governments have within their own countries. Because they print the money, they can print some money which then has a value, and the value of that money is more than it costs them to print it. So they have already made a profit just by printing money, and they can start to buy things just by printing money. Well, when the lead economy has its currency as the global currency, it has seigniorage around the world. So it can just print money, and people will still want it everywhere. And so it will be able to print money to buy goods and services from around the world. And that means it tends to be more recession proof as well. When world trade declines, people become economically depressed. They, instead of stopping wanting that global reserve currency, they typically want it even more because they see that as the safe currency. It's a currency that everybody wants. So that currency, there's still a big demand for it. And so as the world goes into recession, the lead economy can weather that because its money is still worth a lot around the world. And it can just be issuing money. It can get into huge debt with the rest of the world because everybody wants its IOUs, its currency notes. So here is who's had the reserve currency through history. So start with Portugal to around about 1550, Spain to about 1630, the Netherlands, the Dutch up to about 1725, French up to about 1825, the French franc, and then Britain up to about 1920-30, and then the US and the US dollar persisting to today. And what we see from this, of course, is then that the lead economy and the global reserve currency has changed over time as each rises and falls.